Welcome back to the Walk the Talk podcast. This time I was actually able to say it right. The last episode I did forget the name of my own podcast and it was kind of awkward.
That happens, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I forget the name of my best friend, so maybe I should visit some doctor, but let's just go straight into our guest today. That sounded kind of sexually, but should I start a new intro? I'm not good at intros, apparently. Yeah.
Straight into it. Let's get straight. No lube, just straight into it.
Exactly.
All right.
So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Mr. Erik Jongbloed. Do I say that right?
Sure. Yeah.
Wonderful.
That sounds cool.
Okay. So our guest Erik, he's.
Should I look into like some camera or something? Sorry.
No, I'm just like talking to the audience right now. I will look at you when I'm talking to you. But now the audience is very important, so we're introducing you to the audience. And Mr. Erik Jongbloed is a ADHD coach and a personal development coach. Can I say that?
Sure.
Yeah. He's leading a personal development group. And in my notes I have for sure a lot more cool information. For example, he's running a YouTube channel where he shares a lot of personal information and tips on personal development and also, I guess, for the ADHD training. How do you say that properly?
Yeah, I mean I drifted away a little bit from just focusing on ADHD. Because ADHD is just something like I discovered a lot of things about what can improve that, and like there's a limit to that which I haven't yet crossed. So I do share tips about how I live with ADHD, but like there's a limit to like you can't really completely fix ADHD, and I'm really interested in things you can really like completely heal and fix. So I drifted away from ADHD to shadow work, which is just like such a rich topic that, and also it helps with ADHD. But like I think I digress. But maybe that answers your question.
That's good. You're already starting to answer some of the questions that I would have prepared for you. And yeah, I would say let's just jump into some of those questions. For the beginning, I would have asked you to just share a little bit about what you're offering as your coaching and the training, and which you just said is like going into the direction of shadow work. Yeah, what is there to say about you and your work?
Wow, that's a very broad one. Well,
or maybe let me specify it a little bit. How does how can someone who is interested in your work imagine the work? How does it look like to work with you? What is the process? What are the tips and practices that you share or do together?
That's again like it's going to be a very long answer, probably.
Okay.
But yeah, well, I'll answer that in like telling a bit of a story about like what it used to look like and what it looks like now.
Wonderful.
Because there's different phases that my work went through. So I started out just wanting to help other people who have ADHD, like me, and that was something that gave me a lot of meaning and purpose to be like, you know, I have ADHD. It's really kind of debilitating. At the time, it was really debilitating. Like I couldn't show up for work on time. I was constantly under the pressure of almost getting fired. Couldn't focus, couldn't perform, and I felt really bad about it. Like you get this intense shame. So I felt this enormous. It's almost like I got into a depression where like, what meaning does my life have if I can't, you know, be a good performer in any sort of way? If I can barely show up for a job, maybe I can like have a job and like that's it for my life then. I really realized like I have no capability to plan things, execute on any sort of consistent habits or personal projects without like finishing them or like and actually finish them. And so I got into this hopeless state when I was like about 26 where I realized I'm not going to achieve anything like this. But something I can achieve is maybe if I make it through this difficult phase, then I can help other people with it. So then it was like the vision of helping other people with ADHD, even though I still was figuring it out. I still am figuring it out, but that's okay. And I was like a software engineer, so I thought, you know, I'm gonna build an app to help people with ADHD. And that was super fun to work on. Like I sketched out the whole app and like how it was pretty cool actually. Like it would like just, you would look at it and it would just give you like the thing that was like the most important for you to do without showing you all the other things that were the most important to do.
Because so you basically eliminated all the distractions, just focus on what is important now.
Right, and you just put everything that you want to get rid of, you empty your mind into the app, and then it only gives you the thing that is important right now without distracting you with the other things that like cause a lot of pressure and anxiety. And that was cool to work on. And then halfway through, maybe that's also an ADHD thing, but also I kind of like realized I don't really use things like that. And if I use things like that, I don't use them for a very long time. I use them for a couple of months and then I find a new system or something. So I realized maybe this is not like the most purposeful, fruitful thing that I could do. So I kind of put that aside and I realized the human factor is like more impactful. Because how I crawled out of my hole of like constantly almost losing jobs and not achieving anything, not even like making my bed ever, not even, well, you know, you name it, things like ADHD things. How I crawled out of that was through the support of my friend who has ADHD and who is like a little bit better at that, like a little bit further along than me at the time, a bit better at planning his agenda. So yeah, I realized like the human factor is just much more important. So maybe people really need coaching. Like I would have, if I didn't have my pride that told me I have to figure everything out myself, no matter how much I suffer, I would have really appreciated coaching. So maybe that's what I should do, and that's how I started coaching. Then the people who I coached, they basically said, I don't just want like strategies to deal with ADHD. I also kind of want to have something meaningful to work towards besides, you know, doing my job as a programmer, because I didn't focus on like software engineers, but like somehow the people that I attracted were always software engineers. But they also like needed this sense of like deeper purpose. So I was like, okay, well, let's figure that out too. And kind of expanded from there. And then it became like about getting your life headed in a direction that really inspires you and like what that direction should be. I met a lot of other people who also happened by accident to be software engineers who just wanted like this direction, this vision. And I became kind of obsessed with like, well, why can't you just ask people, what do you want? And like get a straight answer. Because I mean, it should be clear, like, what do you want for your life? You know, like you probably have some things, but a lot of people, they don't have some things. They just go blank. And I decided I want to solve that. And what I found was basically mental limitations and things you don't let yourself think, you don't let yourself want. These deep ingrained societal programming and things that you inherit from like your parents and how you grow up and things people say to you when you're young and very impressionable, they still inhibit your mind from like being able to dream and being able to feel into what you really want to do. And so many of these people I talked to, they were like, I don't know what I want, like what should I want? And again, like what should I want? Usually
so you're basically saying a lot of the symptoms of ADHD cross-section with the symptoms of childhood trauma and social conditioning.
Yeah, I'm not saying like ADHD is childhood trauma, but if you have ADHD, you probably also have childhood trauma.
Yeah, I see.
Actually, if you're a person, you probably also have childhood trauma.
Yeah.
but definitely, yeah, so then this reason why people couldn't like feel clearly into what they want was because something in them wasn't allowing it, right? And that is the residual of childhood trauma. So I got more into like helping people to free their mind from that, and that's like a huge topic. It's super fascinating, and I got better and better at that after also doing a lot of that on myself. And my coaching started to become more and more about that.
Yeah.
And that's like such a rich topic. I could probably be obsessed about that for the rest of my life. And
it's beautiful. Sounds like you found your passion right there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it could change, but it seems like this is gonna be the thing for a good while because it's such a rich topic.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and to answer your question, what does it look like to work with me? I used to offer just like individual coaching, so like speaking a couple times a week or something like that. And then I decided like what I'm doing with people is actually, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's in my, that's also like a trap. Like in my mind, it's pretty simple, but it's probably like complicated to like a lay person. but still, like those tools you can use to free yourself from these mental limitations, from this trauma and things like that. I just got curious about the idea, like, can you actually teach people that quickly? If so, can you leverage the power of like a group to get people to help each other with that? And like, does that work? Can you have people do that who are basically amateurs? But I also was an amateur, right? So
I think everybody has something valuable to share. If we see each other, we see some aspects, and we all are able to help each other.
Yeah, exactly. And like everybody has an intuition, and you know, like when you guide people through the depth of their subconscious mind, mostly what you're doing is just contributing your intuition to like forge a path, more so than like applying rules that you studied beforehand. Even I found that in most sessions when I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this technique, and then step 1, step 2, step 3, doesn't usually go so well. But if I feel like, well, I have no idea where to take this, like I've never heard somebody say this before, like what do I do? I'm just gonna guess, like use my intuition and guess, like those are the breakthrough sessions. So I'm like, well, I'm not the only person with an intuition. Like we can leverage the power of the group, and then it's not just limited by me impacting just one person at a time. And so, yeah, that's when I started the group.
Yeah,
for that.
That brings me to a question. By the way, we have the talking gun, and since you're talking much more than me right now, you should hold the talking gun.
I thought we decided against the talking gun.
Oh, I think it's too late for that.
Okay.
The gun is part of this
talking gun
process now.
Yeah, well, I've been holding the talking gun for quite a while.
It's true. You've been talking to the camera a lot today, so maybe you should give it back to me.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. It feels good to hold the talking gun.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So my question would be, since you're saying intuition is a very important part of this process, all of us, we also have just simple life experience, which I relate back to how we can help each other. And I would like to know from you if you saw any one of those two that is like more helpful. Is it like the life experience that you had and observed maybe from your clients that you can give to new clients? Or is it really often like just like being in touch with your intuition that gives those breakthrough experiences? Or is it maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, those two are somewhat, they converge, because intuition is something you have without life experience. Like you're born with it, but you do sharpen it through getting life experience. Actually, one of my favorite ways to sharpen my intuition would be to do things without thinking about them. Because I was always an overthinker, and I was longed to be able to be spontaneous, like either in like what I said or my actions. I was jealous of people that other people said were too impulsive. I'm like, I wish I could be like that. And so I taught myself to do things without thinking too much about them, just to get myself out of that overthinking. And I found that actually sharpens your intuitive mind. Because when you're just, it's like the book Thinking Fast and Slow. If you're just thinking slow, like being all logical and analytical about everything, then you're basically never, well, it's not as black and white, but you can teach yourself to become really intuitive and astute at something without having to think about it. And you can also do that learning process without a lot of analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find like things like meditation help a lot to turn off the mind and get into feeling, and that's where I find my intuition.
Yeah.
And another part of this topic, I think, for many listeners would be interesting, is that ADHD seems to be on the rise, especially through technology, social media, which is basically built to keep your attention span hooked on those platforms, and they design it in a way where basically it starts fucking with your attention span.
It's becoming more mainstream, that's true. It's like it used to be. I mean, ADHD has been a thing since the 40s and 50s, but now it's becoming like, really like social media platforms are trying to like give it to everybody, and not just the people who like were born with it. So, I mean, that's kind of ironic in me saying it. I'm like sort of being, I'm joking, but kind of also not. Like it's true that people are getting so hooked to this dopamine hit of you know, like looking at your phone or like getting a notification about this and that, that it almost makes a non-ADHD brain have very similar symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a thing.
Yeah, and since you, I guess, have done a lot of research, and since you struggle with the illness itself, maybe you can share a little bit about the picture of how does ADHD actually look like?
It could look like different things. So there's two types that sort of also kind of overlap, and it's like the inattentive and the hyperactive. And in my personal experience, those both come from an internal restlessness that can either be expressed through the body or through the mind. So it's a discomfort that is always there, and you need to escape it somehow. And some people, they're just more prone to escaping it by constantly moving around and fidgeting, and I'm also pretty prone to that. And other people are more prone to zoning out, and that means that it's just extremely difficult for them to hold their attention on a conversation or, you know, a lecture or even reading a book. It's extremely difficult. And so those people are kind of working, I don't know, like 5 to 10 times as hard to do normal things than like neurotypical people would be. So you might not even be able to spot it from the outside, but those people just have like way more struggle in their day. It's really like more exhausting to have ADHD. Even though you can do anything, it takes so much work to
basically just to keep up with the normal demands of life.
Yeah.
In the end,
get yourself to sit still. It's something you really don't want to do. It's like, well, everybody recognizes that probably, but if you have ADHD, it's almost like you're constantly fighting yourself every second.
I see.
It's insane.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, but it, you know, it can present as people who just, you know, you can't make appointments with them, and they can't clean their room, and everything is a mess, and they don't have a calendar, and they're always late for work. That's kind of what, before you sort of learn to deal with it, and that's what it looked like for me. And then later it kind of becomes more masked, because, you know, you learn to like hide it from people. So you learn how to hide the fact that you didn't really listen and compensate for that. So for example, if I would have a conversation with you and my ADHD symptoms would be quite high, I'm not listening to you when you're talking, but I am like playing back an audio recording of what you said, which is like almost a minute long, after you basically stop. And I'm like, oh, well, I was supposed to listen. I was actually like here or there. And then with my ability to remember sound, I just like play back the recording and like keep up with you. And that goes so smoothly that you almost don't notice that I'm not able to hold my attention on the conversation. Yeah. Just things like that. We just learn these like strategies to hide. Yeah. Yeah, and this could be in like a million different ways.
I noticed this. I noticed that I use this strategy for myself sometimes. Like, I don't think that I have ADHD, but sometimes I also like drift off in conversations, which I give my very best not to do. When I'm in a conversation, I give my best to give my partner the utmost presence that I have. And again, meditation comes to my mind, because on meditation I usually like practice focusing on one object, and it becomes like when I'm in a conversation, nowadays I use pretty much everything as my meditation object. Like the whole day is meditation, and when I'm in conversation, you're basically the object of my meditation. I try to get the best out of that by not drifting away. So
I like that.
Yeah. And so you said the most effective tool that you have found to cure those, what is the word, the symptoms of ADHD is shadow work. Did I get that right?
No, you can't really cure it, as far as we know. I still would love to discover whether I can cure it. But yeah, like that's what scientists currently say. Like, this is just how you are, and you can learn to cope with it, and that's it. And you can take medication, which helps the internal restlessness calm down. But kind of that's it. And the reason I got into shadow work was, well, first it was because I had this question of why do some people just not know what they want in life, and like where does that come from? And later I observed the effect of like doing childhood trauma healing exercises on myself, and I noticed after that I'm much more calm, much more present. I'm less prone to addiction, and I'm drifting off noticeably less in daily life. For example, like when I'm with my partner's family, I would basically be in my head somewhere else 90% of the time. I did some shadow work, and now it's like, well, 20% of the time. I still have ADHD, like I can still feel my body like wanting to run away most of the day. But the drifting off has lessened quite a bit. Another ADHD symptom, which is not like a main symptom, but something that goes with it, is like low self-esteem, you know, and you can debate whether that's because you've always been shamed for not listening, not remembering things. Yeah. But the low self-esteem it's pretty bothersome, and I was able to really improve my self-esteem through shadow work, or trauma work, or like it kind of like blurs that line a little bit.
For me, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And so I was like, well, if I can improve my self-esteem massively, that's a good experience to have, especially if my life has been so frustrating. And if I can be relatively more present and less prone to addiction, even though I still am, but much less so, that's amazing. And like that's actually the only thing that I discovered that you can do besides medication, and I don't hear so many other people talking about that. So that's why.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I would love to dive a little bit more deeply into shadow work, because it has become a buzzword, I'd say, in the spiritual and personal development world.
Man, I think I'm hanging out with the wrong people, because when people ask me what I do, I'm like, oh, I'm a shadow work guy, and people are like, what's that?
Okay, then let's use the opportunity and maybe bring shadow work a little bit more closely to the people. So you work with the practice of shadow work, and if it's possible, maybe you can explain a little bit the basics of what is shadow work and how do you do it?
Yeah. Well, shadow work is really broad, but what that means is you work with everything that exists in your psyche that it doesn't exist in your field of awareness. So there's much more to, basically what you're aware of inside yourself is only the tip of the iceberg. And then the rest is your shadow. That's like the simple model of thinking about it.
Okay.
And there's popular descriptions such as like it's everything that you don't want to see about yourself, which is kind of true, or everything you don't like about yourself, or all the emotions that you don't think you should feel, for example, is also like...
And all the thoughts that you should not think.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Negative self-talk is coming from the shadow. But also if you have this anger, but you think it's not okay to be angry, or it's not okay, like all these things that we kind of push out of our field of awareness, that's part of the shadow. But then it goes much deeper than that. There's also, realms that most people haven't even touched, because it controls so much of like how your body even feels.
What are those realms that you're pointing to right now?
A lot of it actually presents at a physical level too, and most people are not aware of that. They think it's just a mental thing, but the shadow or your unconscious. I think first I have to go into why are these things unconscious? Why are we not aware of everything?
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason is that there's a barrier that's being created when a traumatic realization would otherwise come to consciousness. So we, as we grow up, we invent. Well, we don't consciously do that, but our brain makes walls to prevent us from realizing something that could destroy us.
And from feeling painful emotions.
Yes. And it's not just the painful emotions, because as a child you've felt many painful emotions, and that doesn't always create trauma. But when all of those painful emotions add up, and it's like almost inevitable that you would conclude something life-threatening from that. So it's not just like something painful happening one time, like that could be traumatic, could not be traumatic. But if several painful experiences over a few years, like it becomes inevitable to conclude from that something that is like, you know, threatening your survival, then your brain creates a wall, and then everything that is behind that wall, which is experiences, feelings, sensations, talents, abilities, becomes the shadow, and it almost becomes this sub-personality within your personality, which doesn't communicate with the rest of you, but it communicates with you through voices in your head, whether it be annoying thoughts or actual voices in your head, you know. And that's how the shadow is created. So if we didn't go through any trauma, we wouldn't need a shadow. Yeah.
I think like it also creates certain perceptions of how we see the world, and we're not even really aware that we can just like change them if we go into the depth of the shadow and start touching and bringing those to the light of awareness.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It does influence the way you see the world. It almost determines the way you see the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was a pretty good intro already. Like, to be honest, I used you so much as my meditation object right now. I felt like I almost started melting into you. You have a great speaking flow. I think it's like almost hypnotized by just looking at you and seeing you speak. So I didn't even like, there were almost like no mental content in terms of questions that came up for me. Almost lost track a little bit. Do I have ADHD, Erik?
No, I think you're just very in the moment. And I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Yeah. So let me just have a quick look at my notes sheet and see if I can or want to jump in a specific point. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about specific techniques that you use in shadow work, maybe with your clients. Maybe if you're up for that, we could even like make a live demonstration with like guidance or something like that. I don't know if that is possible or fitting, or if it's like if it's okay for you to share something like that, like freely like that.
Yes, I actually make a point of sharing freely how to. On my YouTube channel as well. I've actually, for a while I was afraid of like, well, if I share these tools, you know, I won't be useful to anyone anymore, and like, how will I make money or something?
Yeah.
But turns out that people have such a high resistance to doing any type of work like this, that very few people will actually use any sort of instruction. And actually that's kind of beautiful and sad at the same time, because it's beautiful because that's the way the shadow works. It's like it creates resistance against seeing. And when you're about to do something that will make some part of the shadow come into the light and into consciousness, your mind will start to, you know, like have really strong resistance and all these thoughts and reasons why you shouldn't. Like Carl Jung said, you know, famous quote. What was the famous quote? I think it was something about, yeah, you'll get what you most need when you look where you don't want to look. I should remember that quote better, but it's like we're so hardwired to not want to look there because that's our internal repression system, keeping that wall intact. So people will also have that resistance against doing an exercise, even though I explain to people this is how to do it. Most people won't do it.
Yeah, and in the beginning there's also like, it doesn't really look like there's much to get because you have to do the exercise to get to the to start digging.
Yeah.
And when you haven't started, it's like, well, I don't really see any reason why I should do it. Like, I'm sitting here, I'm fine and everything. So that's already like maybe a distraction technique. And we need to restart this camera because it's...
Okay. So I'll answer your previous question about like what are the techniques that you like to use. Just very broad because there's so many, but
yeah, maybe you can give us a little bit of a list, and then if you're up for that, we can choose one that maybe the people who see this can try for themselves, like to get a little bit of a taste.
Sure, okay. But then that would require you to have a topic in mind. So there's kind of two categories that I would separate, and one is more along the lines of trying to change your beliefs and attitudes and feelings directly. And that's not my favorite thing to do because it's temporary. So if you view your mind as a layered thing, like your psyche is made out of, like, let's say 3 layers, and the top layer contains everything you're thinking, feeling, and your opinions and attitudes about your current life, and then below that is your childhood feelings, mostly the childhood feelings that haven't yet fully integrated, and then below that is your baby feelings, which is feelings that most people are not in touch with at all, but also some of those are not fully integrated. And so those contain unfelt pain, unprocessed trauma, and they heavily influence the layers above that. Yeah. Which means that we are run by, for example, phobias are like caused by that, and compulsions are caused by unprocessed birth trauma. And I forgot how I was, the question was like, no, I was explaining which techniques I like and which I don't like. So there's techniques which kind of ignore the bottom layers and say, we're gonna replace your feelings and thoughts and beliefs with other feelings and thoughts and beliefs. And those are, for example, things like positive affirmations, but also gratitude journaling and different things like gratitude meditations and forgiveness exercises, and also existential kink exercises, for example, which is like find things that you don't like and you repeat certain patterns over and over, and like find the feelings behind those patterns, and it could be like falling into relationship dynamics that are unhealthy, for example, right? And you get those feelings that gives you, and then existential kink would, for example, say, okay, find those feelings and like make yourself like those feelings so that they don't bother you anymore, and then you let it go, and then it doesn't chase you anymore. And that works, but in my opinion that is kind of really a waste, because those feelings can also lead you to the deeper cause of why that is even a pattern for you, and then you can heal something. Then you can work your way back to where you incurred that pain, and if you do that, then that won't bother you in other ways in the future anymore. Yeah. Whereas if you just say, oh, I'm having this pattern, and like if I change this feeling about it, it won't bother me anymore, but then there's still the trauma, and the trauma will like bubble up and create a different problem. So yeah, there's 2 ways to summarize, and one thing is like just like, trying to change your beliefs and feelings in the moment for the better, which is like, there's nothing wrong with that, that helps you. But it's also
like situationally beneficial.
Situationally beneficial. I do that sometimes. I've done that sometimes, and sometimes I encourage people to do that. But most of
I think it has. So it's more time and place.
Yeah, no, it's great. But I'm more interested in like, why do you even have these negative thoughts or feelings?
Yes.
About something that doesn't seem like it should be that negative. Is it because this or that happened? And you never know because it's unconscious. You usually don't know why, but you can find out. And if you then heal that, then it's not going to cause other problems in the future. Like it's not going to make you overreact to other situations in the future, which to me it's much more fulfilling, because I like things to be like permanently effective and as thorough as possible. Yeah, so I don't really like surface level approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like emptying that reservoir of, I don't know how to call it, like unhealthy, not unhealthy, but almost like fermented old emotions, repressed stuff, and you bring it to the surface, and by emptying that, well, there is no more reason for you to, for your subconscious to like produce unhealthy, negative thoughts, perceptions, and emotions and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, when you said you need to have one topic in mind, I had like immediately one topic came up, and I was like, immediately I was in a little bit of a shock situation, because it's one that I definitely want to take a look at, but actually not want to take a look at in front of the camera.
All right, that's too bad, because that would be the perfect thing.
That would be the perfect thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would be the exercise that you would do?
You don't have to do that, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I say that is because I've been doing this for years, and I find that usually when you have a session like that with people, something comes up that has been trying to come up for months or years.
Yeah.
And like this can even manifest as people having a depression and they don't know why. But like the moment they start doing shadow work, it's like, oh, it's this. And I'll just have myself as an example. I was like always having this really weak feeling when it was kind of like becoming autumn and then winter, and I felt really weak, and I felt really like a child lost at the supermarket, you know. And I decided, well, I should kind of do the shadow work thing, right? Because that's my thing. So why not apply it? And I found out there was this memory about being sent to like a school camp or something, and I really didn't want to be there. Nobody liked me there. The teacher didn't protect me from bullying. And you know, everyone laughed at me for crying, and there was like a traumatic thing that I just had repressed. I didn't remember that, and that was just, it had been trying to get my attention by making me feel weak and like a lost child. Yeah. The moment I turned my attention inward, it could come out, and like I could become aware of it, feel it, and I immediately, like after that session, which only took like an hour, I'm like, oh my god, let's go, like let's explore. I went on like a huge bike ride and like went on an adventure. I felt completely different for like weeks after that, and it didn't come back in the exact same way. Yeah. Which is like a good example of how something that is trying to come up, like if you don't give it the attention through shadow work, it can just be bothering you and messing with your current feelings forever until you turn inwards. And so the way I like to work with people is basically I kind of ask them about like, hey, what's going on in your life, and what do you feel about what's going on in your life? Because the shadow has a way of like trying to get your attention by attaching feelings to present day situations that belong in the past. So that means, you know, you have a job.
So you're basically confusing your perception that you have of something with something that has actually happened in the past.
Exactly.
So you're projecting it onto something where it's not belonging to.
Yes, exactly. And so, you know, tons of examples, but for me that would be, for example, colleague disagrees with me, gives me constructive feedback, and instead of thinking, oh, okay, well, yeah, thanks for the constructive feedback, I just go, fuck this guy, because I feel like he bullied me, you know, and he didn't bully me. Someone bullied me, but it wasn't him. Right, but you know, because we don't usually turn inwards when we feel bad. We usually turn to like stress eating or smoking or like whatever the thing is. Yeah, you don't realize that, but that's, the shadow has a way of like calling your attention, if you're willing to listen, by changing your feelings about your present day life to match the feelings that you're still having to integrate. Which is why I usually start by asking people, how do you feel about what's going on in your life? Like, how have you been feeling? Have you noticed any overreactions, any underreactions? You know, are you reacting extremely strongly to something that should have been not such a big deal? And those are usually really good pointers.
I see. Yeah, I'm kind of like excited to go in, but I don't know how much time it would require to showcase something like that.
Well, we can do it like just like a talking style, and then that doesn't have to take super long. It also depends on how, see, some people, they just find the answers quickly, and some people it just takes more time to feel, and we can see how it goes for you. I'll just keep it like super safe and like kind of easy to get into, out of.
Let's try it.
Do you have like an example in mind where you felt like, well, you know, I kind of overreacted to something, or like something? Another good way to recognize it is that if you keep thinking about something that happened, even though like it shouldn't have been a big deal, but you still ruminate on it when you try and go to sleep, or you keep like rationalizing something to yourself, like, no, it was fine that I said that, but like, still it bothers you a little bit.
Yeah. So the topic that came for me and where I immediately felt contraction, because really is we're recording this and it's about a person, and potentially she could just like see this. That person is my relationship partner at the moment, and we're going through some difficulty. We're in a long distance relationship right now, which brings quite some aspects that I don't really know yet how to deal with those. And with some strange emotions that I can't really pinpoint down where they are, heavy feelings, at the same time very high highs and extreme feelings of love and gratitude for that person, which checks all the checkbox marks that I wanted to have for a partner. And now that I have her, is it's difficult, and I'm having trouble to even have clarity over this relationship. There's like so much fog, and it's hard for me to like even talk about what is going on in the relationship at this moment in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you're bringing it up because you're willing to have me ask questions about that, or do you not want to go into that?
Well, it was the one topic that I had a strong emotional reaction to when it came, and then it was like I held it back because of the fear of exposure right now. But then I was like looking or asking myself, is there any other topic that I would like to go in right now? But everything else in my life is very clear right now. There's the topic of work, but it's I feel like
can I ask you something about the fear of exposure?
Yes.
So, what would happen if?
What would happen
you
if?
exposed it?
Well, my fear was if I say something that kind of like brings the relationship towards an end, and I fear the end of the relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. I fear that I might end something or lose something that was actually meant to grow.
Okay. So, you know, that could be like rational or it could be irrational. And a good way to kind of check that for yourself is if she was doing a podcast, like just reverse the situation. Like she was doing a podcast and reveals some feelings about her relationship with you, and you watch the podcast. Like, would you then be inclined to end the relationship? Or like, how would you look at that from the reverse perspective?
To be honest, if I would see her talking in my situation right now and exposing those very personal feelings to you in front of basically the world right now, I would feel a little strange because I would love to clean the topic between me and her.
Yeah. Well, that's probably then just a sign of your internal value system that is giving you a signal that you're, you know, thinking about doing something that would violate your own values, and you want to be consistent with those values. Because if you're not consistent with those values, how can you expect other people to be?
Yeah.
So then you probably shouldn't go into it, because
Exactly.
you wouldn't like it when other people did that.
Yeah, like I feel the exact same way right now, and I love that you brought me to this point and kind of like, I don't know, it feels like you checked the safety net for me right now if I even really want this. And I am like really excited to be guided by someone who has experience with guiding people. But apparently this is not the right situation for me right now.
This is not the right situation because it's not right for you to expose that because.
Yeah, and I kind of love that we came to that point here right now.
Yeah.
It was not what I first thought will come out of it, but beautiful. I find it beautiful. And now I'm a little bit lost where to go next with this conversation.
Anywhere you want to go, man. Like if you want to do the guided thing, like I would love to, but like we can also do that another time.
Yeah.
And if this is what's most prominent for you, and this is what your feelings that you're feeling when you go to sleep, or whatever kind of as a layer substrate beneath everything else, like is about that, and we can't go into that. Good, but then like. Let's not do that.
Yeah, no, it's not the right situation. As I said, like I would love to do it, but in a private setting.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like we could do that any other time about any other thing.
Yeah.
So, but like to answer your question is basically what I ask you now. Like I already heard you talk, and then for you it was about. I think for you it was about like certain feelings you had towards the relationship, but I'm just listening to you and I'm like saying, okay, what is the theme that is coming to the surface? And it's like, well, it's always about the thing that is most like on top, that needs attention first. So in this case it was fear of exposure, and then it's like, okay, well, go into that. And in this case, it's because a value system thing, but it could also have been something. Well, I kind of don't know why I had this fear of exposure, but it just feels very scary. Then I would have gone into, okay, well, like anchor it in the body so you can really turn inwards, which means where do you feel it? Like, and if you had to like put like a color and a shape on it, like really just focus on what is that sensation and feeling, and then if you kind of like stay in that and meditate on it, like there's a lot of questioning techniques that I could do, but basically if just keep your attention on it without drifting off or like trying to escape it,
And
it
that-
will
that
eventually
is-
reveal to you why it's there. And if you get used to that process, it, you know, usually just memories start to come up where you felt that exact same way.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, I felt this exact same way then, and then, and then, and this is actually like a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of work with that, and I could work with that.
Yeah,
in
that
different
paints
ways,
the picture very clear on how you go from layer to layer until you eventually, hopefully, reach the core of things.
Yeah, so like my job is then to become like really, or like to be very sharp at noticing things, because you thought it was about a specific feeling towards your partner, but I'm just noticing what's up, and what's up is like, for example, the fear of exposure, and like I have to notice that. I have to be so sharp and like clean of like my own stuff that I can notice these things. So that's kind of like the thing about it. That's my job is like make sure that my own stuff doesn't clog my my vision.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, when you start a session like this, do you automatically become more attentive and aware, and like your stuff subsides? Because that's how it is for me. When someone opens up emotionally, my stuff just like flies out the window and the other person becomes important.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm also able to ask pointed questions.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it does, which is why I do this, because as a person with ADHD, I really love it when it's not hard to focus, and that's a rare experience, and it feels great.
Yeah.
And it's not many things that give me that feeling. And it used to be programming. It's not even programming anymore. Now it's just like moments like that where like you have this effortless presence working with somebody's subconscious mind, or things like sex also gets me like in a flow state. But anything else, or sleep, and anything else, it's just like it's hard to focus. And in these sessions, it's like easy to be present, which is why I love it. It's also like a selfish reason, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very helpful.
Yeah, man. But like we can take it in any sort of direction. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think we checked all the boxes of my info sheet that I had written down.
Cool. Cool.
And I think we gave a good insight in what you do and how you work. We had at least a little bit of a small example. I don't know. I'm pretty much through with what I could think of in the small moments that I had time to prepare for this podcast. And I'm just thinking maybe there's something that you would like to bring in. We had, for example, the sharing circles that we could touch upon, or maybe anything else that you would like to share.
So like I have a like currently very small online group where we do this type of work with each other. Like I just collected some people that I've coached with previously. I recently opened it up to like the public, or like people who have heard of me somewhere, like I might actually let in. So if you feel called, then apply. But in that group we do like
links
shadow
will
work.
Be in the description.
Links will be in the description, yes.
Yeah.
And we do shadow work, but we'd also do shadowing circles, because I found that one of the most therapeutic and powerful things that I have done in my personal development is like with a trusted group of people, talk, and while I talk, get into deeper layers of myself and have people's like loving attention on me while I uninterruptedly empty my mind, and also like catalyze insights while I'm talking. It's so simple, because all people do is just like not interrupt you. But like whenever does a friend do that for you? It's like let you talk for 15 minutes without interrupting you.
Yeah.
But it's so therapeutic, it's so helpful. Like we also do that. So that's the two things that we regularly do in my group, because to me it's so important. But people ask me things that you would normally ask yourself or like run into when you start doing like a sharing practice, which is like, well, what do I even talk about? And what if I have, my mind goes blank and I'm too anxious to think of anything to say? Or what if I feel like I have to perform or like say something interesting for other people?
That's already something that you can share. Like if you come into that situation, you can start by, I'm feeling anxious. I don't know what to share.
Exactly. So I thought it would be really cool, because you just came from a sharing circle
yesterday night.
Yes. talk a bit about that and how that's like for you, and also what you would say to people who like just start that sort of practice and who might struggle with like knowing even what to say.
Yeah.
But let's first dig into how it was for you. Like, I'm curious. We didn't talk about it yet.
Yesterday was maybe the most beautiful sharing circle for me personally, for I think 2 reasons. One of them was that 2 friends that I know now for more than 10 years, one of them, and the other one is more than 15 years. They came to the sharing circle for the first time for them, and I just loved sitting with old friends in this kind of setting where there's a frame being made where you're encouraged to share your vulnerable self, the stuff that you don't usually share and want to share. And I don't know, just like how the leader of this group, by the way, is a men's sharing circle. Only men came together yesterday. Of course, how he opens the circle, what kind of intentions he uses, and the words and where he guides us is super important. For example, he encouraged us to connect to our own personal truth and speak that truth basically. And he also had a topic, for example, which was empowerment. He encouraged us to contemplate and look at empowerment. How does that look for us? For example, how do we live empowerment? What does stop us from being empowered, and share those things to the group? And often it's like super beautiful when one person starts speaking and they share and we all listen, and it's like a format where we have like a stick and the one who has the stick basically talks, everybody else listens. We had the gun for this, by the way.
The talking gun, yes. To like encourage vulnerability.
Exactly. To encourage vulnerability, yes. Yeah. And I find it super beautiful because one person starts to open up as authentically as possible, ideally, and there's coming something through that when we put aside all our defense mechanisms, that we try to pretend that we're better than we actually are, or try to impress the other people in this way, but just be as raw as it really gets. And we show ourselves, and usually that does something to the people that are listening, and then we can, a very unique evening each time develops from when one person has spoken, and of course each of us bring our own stuff, but then we connect to something that the person before us has said, and the stick goes its round, and certain topics emerge, and there's suddenly you start seeing yourself in the problems of the other person. And I noticed one thing that I noticed especially yesterday is the vibe of the group before the circle and after the circle, and how incredibly open and easygoing and flowing the conversations were after the circle. After 2 to 3 hours of openly sharing, it was so easy to connect to everybody else in the circle, while before we had that anxiousness and not really know what to say. And afterwards, after some practices, we also did practices, for example, and the sharings, it was just like easygoing, go up to someone and say whatever you just wanted to say, or whatever interests you, just ask it, and it's like a much more open space. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you said it really does something to the people who are listening, but what does it do to you to be the one who's sharing?
For me, at this point, it became really easy to share just what is inside of me, but it was not always like that. I noticed the progression. In the beginning, I would be very cautious of what I say. I would even maybe stutter and be very occupied in my thoughts about thinking, well, do they judge me if I say this? Do they judge me if I say that? But as experience has shown, I'm the one who judges me the most, and I'm the one whose judgment impacts me the most. So over time, it just became really open and easy for me to just share and say whatever I think, and I give the validation to myself compared, or what is the right word, compared to expecting other people to give it to me and waiting for them to give it to me. So that's how it feels to me, just really open, and I validate what I say, and I say to myself, it's okay. And especially in a circle like this, it becomes really easy when people who are already into personal development and spirituality and all that stuff that comes with it sit with you, and also they help you by not judging you and giving you the acceptance. It helps you to accept yourself much more easily.
Yeah, and that's also what I always say is like non-judgment is really important to realize that nobody's judging you, right? And it's also not even about, I'm not sure if you would agree with me, but it doesn't have to be something that's entertaining to other people. The thing you're sharing, like whatever is coming out, it's not for other people in a sense, even though they are listening. Would you agree with that?
It doesn't necessarily have to be entertaining. No, I'm not sure if I got the question right now.
Well, because it's something that I tend to say, but I'm still playing with how to phrase it, because a lot of people they get really in their head about, well, am I saying the thing that are like other people want to hear, or like, you know, and it's like it's only therapeutic and helpful if you're sharing from what is true for you, which is kind of, you can't control whether that's entertaining or whether other people want to hear that or not.
And the question precisely is?
I forgot what the question was now.
Oh shit!
But let's say, like, what would you say? Because that's what I really want to know. Like, what would you say to people who basically get in their head of like draw a blank when it's their turn to share, even though they really want to do it? Even though they really want to do it.
Yeah, I guess if you're really blank, start by saying you're blank, and I have very little experience with that, because usually there is something that I want to say, and then I grab the stick, or the stick comes to me, and if there's nothing to say, I accept that and I just pass on the stick. And it not always has to be something to be said. You can also just participate as a listener and with your presence by yourself. I don't force myself to say anything.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the way I do it in my group is basically everyone takes a turn, and there's no stick because it's online. So when it's your turn, sometimes there's nothing, but basically you still finish your turn. Yeah. So that could be why some people, but I do find, because it's not just that sometimes it's just not your turn, there's nothing. Like, I do find that when people get used to the practice, there's always things. And they always are able to fill their 15 to 20 minutes of sharing with something that they didn't know before it was going to come out, but it came out and they feel better afterwards. So yeah, I'm not quite sure like how to explain that, but there does seem to be some sort of habituation to that process where it seems really awkward in the beginning, and then later you kind of like get how to do it and how to get benefit out of that. Like,
well, I guess I never was forced myself to talk for 10, 15 minutes straight. Actually, yes, I was forced in certain practices where it was like, okay, now you talk 5 minutes, or you talk 10, 15, it was never that long, 5 minutes. And maybe it's just me personally, but sometimes my mind just goes really blank, and that just like, I don't have anything to say that I could say authentically. I could just like ramble bullshit, but that would not be beneficial to anybody. So I would say, hey, let's just stay with the silence. So that is how it is for me. But I also get that maybe it would be very helpful for some people to like push them and just like speak, and maybe something comes up. But for me, it's in the sharing circle, usually I have something to share, sometimes not. And the stick goes around and I hear other people and it triggers something that I would like to share, and next round I speak again. That's
a nice approach. I like that, yeah. Yeah, so the way I tend to do it is like, I don't really force people to talk, but I do encourage people to finish their turn. So if there's silence, then there's silence, and let's all be silent, but you're still taking up the space, which is already sometimes really hard for people to like take up their space, right?
Exactly.
And so we do that exercise of like, well, it's your turn. So even if we just want to be silent, then we're all just here putting our attention on you. And sometimes that's like, some people love it. They're like, oh my God, I love attention. Like, I never even get this usually. And some people are like, oh my God, like there's attention on me, and they freak out. That's already like a super interesting thing to work with.
Exactly.
And there's the aspect of, if you gently force yourself to talk, even though you might not, there might be resistance, that's kind of the barrier between your presentable self and your unpresentable messy self. Sometimes is that barrier of like, well, now I'm out of things that I would say to a stranger, so now the only thing left to say if I have to keep talking is the things I'm not ready to share, because they're not pretty and they're not perfect, and I don't want people to see them, but if you do that, like, then people see them and they accept them and they love them, and you're like, oh my God, you didn't have to hide that anyways.
Yeah, and I think just like if you use the model of everybody gets 10 to 15 minutes to talk, and someone is like honestly blank or maybe doesn't want to share the ugly things, but for me, like sometimes I'm literally like I don't feel there's nothing to share. I think questions can be a great tool, just like pointing to different areas of the life. Tell us about your the friendships that you're having right now. Tell us about your work life or whatever. And maybe when they just like start talking, then it's like, yeah, that was that aspect. Because often we just forget about the important stuff or that stuff that touches us. It's not always active.
And so why do you do it?
The sharing circles?
Yeah.
For one, I love a space where people come together, in this case men, to where we all together like show ourselves raw as we are.
Yeah.
It does something to me. I enjoy the nature. We usually do it in nature.
What does it do to you?
What it does to me?
Yeah.
It connects me to my personal truth. And it makes me relaxed and it makes me more confident. I just accept all aspects of myself. I'm not saying that I'm at the point where I accept really all aspects by myself, but I go different out the circle like I came in usually.
Yeah.
If it's not every circle is that strong like yesterday, but I still feel the impact today, for example, from what has happened yesterday and in the state that I came in, and I think the state that we all created together by being willing to show ourselves.
I really like what you said about that it creates a state of accepting all of yourself, even though that's not, that's a state we would love to be in all the time, which we're not, but even though that practice really brings you back to a state of self-acceptance unconditionally.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that. Like I was looking for like a good sounding explanation of why I think sharing is such an important practice, and why I encourage people to do that.
Yeah, and I think this state where you really come into accepting yourself, it's a state where I can just like be without needing big things in my life to happen. It's just like, I don't know, I guess natural bliss, you could call it, emerges.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I love it too. But thank you for articulating why. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I would say, let's bring this podcast to an end.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any last words that you would maybe like to share for the audience? Or maybe for me, for yourself?
No, it's been good, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for it is actually the first proper conversation that we had since I basically stayed with you for this weekend because we were so busy producing things.
I was super busy.
So I really enjoyed that, and I'm happy we had this talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming over. I totally enjoyed the conversation with you, and I'm looking forward to have more conversation, and I don't care about the cameras, let's have them offline, so to say.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
And then I would say thank you for coming, and thank you for joining and checking in.